Okay, so our next guest got a really interesting guest. We're going to be talking about a bit of nutrition. It's that sort of time of year where, uh, if you're anything like me, you've probably indulged in a little bit more chocolate than I would have liked to be honest. But it is what it is. Why not every now and again? But we'll look at eating times. I must admit, this kind of resonates with me because I do eat at personally at different sort of times, and a lot of it coincides with work, and no doubt our listeners as well. Sometimes, we eat at different times. So our guest today is Carolyn Pallister, is a registered dietitian and head of nutrition, research and health at Slimming World. Caroline, welcome to the show. Great to have you on board.
Thanks for having me on, Jimmy.
Can you tell us a bit about the research, Caroline, around sort of the times that we eat?
Yeah, absolutely. So this piece of research involved polling over 2,000 adults, and it looked at all sorts from what time of day we tend to eat our evening meal, right the way through to how often we discuss food day to day. So in terms of what time we eat, the most common time on average was around 6:28 p.m. Tends to be the time that people sit down to have their evening meal. The evening meal being called dinner or tea, depending on where you live. I think it can vary, absolutely. But what it also showed us was that we talk a lot about what we're going to have for our dinner. It actually adds up to about 48 hours over a year. So we're clearly very interested in food and real food lovers, I think, in the fact that we talk about it so much.
No, absolutely. Is that exactly 6:28, Caroline, or that's a bit
It sounds
specific?
it's very specific, isn't it? We can round it to 6:30, definitely.
Yeah. On that topic, I was going to ask you what you were going to have for dinner, but I won't do that. But yeah, I mean, it is true, isn't it? And I suppose a lot of it's down to planning, isn't it? Sometimes you kind of think, okay, well, this is what I'm going to have for dinner type thing. And do you think that's possibly we kind of might vocalize it to sort of get an idea of what we're going to have that in the evening? Do people plan, in your experience, for their meals, Caroline?
I think people do like to plan, yeah. And I think that we're probably also looking for inspiration when we're asking each other what we're having for dinner. I think that we can get kind of into a bit of a routine of having the same things. And I think probably by asking your colleagues or friends what they're having, maybe that'll give us a bit of inspiration to try something different.
No, absolutely. And I suppose there's one thing sort of having all the right intentions. There's nothing sort of keeping to it, keeping it as well. I mean, I've tried in the past planning different sort of meals, but, with the view of sort of cutting certain types of foods out, to be fair, but sort of come mealtime, it's not always as easy as that. And what's your take on that? I mean, in terms of, is that sort of what a lot of the people, the research suggests we might plan, have an idea, we might want to sort of cut bread or whatever out type thing, but sort of come mealtime, it's like the temptation's just too great.
Yeah, I think meal times can be quite a challenging time, especially if we haven't planned. So, if you find yourself at home after a busy day of work and then suddenly thinking, what am I going to have for tea? And you're looking in the fridge and there's not a lot that's inspiring you in there. That can be a really kind of challenging time where we might then lean on convenience foods or takeaways and that type of thing. So I think planning can be a really useful strategy. If you can make the time to kind of plan out what you're going to have for the rest of the week, say, and make sure you've got those ingredients in, it can make preparing the food and getting things ready nice and quickly for yourself that bit easier, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, for me, and I'm not sure if this resonates for a lot of listeners really, sometimes it's like it's the temptation to sort of like buy more than we need type thing. And it's like, I mean, that's the only issue sometimes. It's like, okay, the food's there, you might buy, say, the sort of packs of sort of crisps or whatever, or biscuits, and you think, okay, I'm going to limit myself to one or two, but then sometimes you have a hard day, it's a comfort food, and you have more than what you sort of feel you should have had. What are some things, and what's your take on how can we sort of like navigate around some of those sort of things, Caroline?
Yeah, it's a real challenge, isn't it? And definitely, I think if we've got those temptations in at home, it's very easy to have them. I think different people try different things. Certainly, in terms of kind of what you have in your cupboards and so on. If you are, say, going to the supermarket, making a shopping list before you go and trying to stick to it can be a really useful strategy. And avoiding some of those aisles, like the crisp or the chocolate aisle, can be helpful for some. Equally, I don't think that we need to go fully without. I think life would be quite dull and boring if we cut out all of the food that brought us joy. So I would say that kind of having small amounts of those things in and allowing yourself a little bit of what you fancy can be quite a healthy way to eat as well. And I think if you're having kind of nice, delicious, satisfying evening meals, you might find that you don't need to kind of pick at that snack cupboard quite as much as well.
No, absolutely. No, I suppose it comes down to that support as well, because I find sometimes where I may well what maybe constitutes eating well, and then all of a sudden one evening you might think, you know what, I'm just going to order that takeaway. I'm going to go out for that sort of meal, which is fine, but it's being able to sort of control that, if that makes any sense, sort of, Caroline, where, sometimes it spirals. Like, for example, you might get through the whole week and eat relatively well. You might think, oh, during the weekend I'll have whatever. But then that sort of, you when you break that pattern, it's sort of not always easy to get back into sort of the good habits again. And I think having some support would go a long way for that myself.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think that, it's important not to beat ourselves up for that. If we've had a really good week and then we might, go out for a meal out or something, it's about enjoying that and then kind of seeing that for what it is, enjoying it, making every moment of it, and then getting back on track kind of the next day and feeling okay with that. And I think support is so crucial, as you say, Jimmy. And that's one of the real strengths that members find if they join something like a Slimming World group, because there are lots of like-minded people with the same goals around eating healthier and kind of managing their weight, and being able to kind of share strategies and ideas and motivation and inspiration to be able to kind of stay on plan with things.
Yeah, and just speaking of that, like in a slimming world, I mean, what insights can you give us in terms of how, I know obviously it's a short time, but just a general overview for sort of listeners, because sometimes you'll sort of see, you'll walk past somewhere where there's a group, and I suppose for a lot of people it might be the first step, sort of walking through the door type thing, and it might be for some people like a bit, I wouldn't say intimidating, but you're not quite sure what it's going to be like when you go in there, and obviously sort of no doubt things have changed over the years in terms of, like, different groups, and but what sort of, how does it work in terms of the anyone who might be nervous about going to Slimming World?
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, Jimmy. I think it is a really daunting thing to enter a new group like that, and people can feel worried about it. I guess I'd want to reassure people that actually, when you walk through the doors of a group like Summerwood, it's incredibly warm and friendly. Once you get there, everyone that's there is there for the same reason. They've got a shared goal of wanting to manage their weight. The consultant running the group has actually lost weight with Slimming World themselves as well, so knows exactly what it feels like to walk through that door because they've done it themselves before. And really, what you'd find within that group is lots of support, friendship, sharing of recipes and ideas. People often will buddy up with other people and kind of go on, say, a walk together, that type of thing. So also build activity into their day as well. And it can be a really kind of safe place to meet every week, to be able to talk about food, talk about habits, and make new plans and kind of build that healthy lifestyle around it.
No, thanks for sharing that insight. And do people generally stay for as long as they lose or reduce the weight they want, or do they sort of stay afterwards too? Because I'm thinking, okay, well, you achieve your goal, a weight goal, and then it's not always easy keeping that off. Sometimes life's plans, and it could be through, you might be going through a difficult time in life. It might be that basically, you indulge at a certain time of year, Easter, Christmas, and it's hard to get back on track. How does it generally work, Caroline? Do people kind of stay on because they find the support really helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's different for everybody because everyone finds things differently. But I would say that we really encourage people to stick around once they have kind of lost their weight as well, because it's, as you say, maintaining weight can be a challenge. And I think carrying on accessing that support can be really, really helpful. And actually, they're so inspiring to have in the group, for those newer members that are walking in and meeting people that have achieved the dreams that they wanted to. And certainly at Slimming World, members can actually attend free of charge once they reach their personal target weight. So there's a real incentive for them to carry on kind of with those healthy habits.
Absolutely, and just on the eating times, I mean, what I find interesting really is that, I mean, I've tried to make a conscious effort in the past and not eating after a certain time. Ideally, maybe a cutoff point, 7, half 7, if possible. Sometimes it's not possible because obviously we might do something in the evening. I might sort of go out to do some football coaching, or I might be teaching in the evening, for example, and then you haven't eaten during that period, and you'll eat later, say 9, half 9. Are the implications in sort of there? I know everyone's different, sort of, Caroline, but are the implications of sort of like eating at a certain time late if we're looking to lose weight? I mean, what's the implications, for example, if we are eating at, say, 9, half 9, and then going to bed an hour later?
Yeah, I think you're right, Jimmy, in that you kind of have to do what works for you because as much as we might try and eat earlier, our lifestyle doesn't always allow that. So I think that's the first thing to say. But I guess the one I guess downside of eating that bit later is it can affect our sleep. We might not sleep as well if our body's busy kind of digesting that food, and lack of sleep can actually have a knock-on impact then on making us hungrier the next day. So it can turn into a bit of a vicious cycle. So I think trying to get into a routine that works for you where possible makes real sense. But I would also say don't beat yourself up if you end up having a meal a bit later than planned, because that's life, and we have to kind of navigate that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, to be fair, that you've made there, because I have one of those sort of sleep what the monitors that you sleep on the watch, and I don't know how accurate it is, but I do notice that if I have eaten closer to bedtime, that the sleep isn't as good as it would be as a general rule if I've eaten earlier. Whether there's sort of a correlation there, it's just anecdotal, and I don't know how accurate the watch is, but I have noticed obviously that that if I do eat close to bedtime, then and it does have a knock-on effect the next day as well. To be fair, if you haven't sort of slept well too, it does certainly have a knock-on effect. But it is really interesting, to be honest, in terms of the research as well. And I suppose sort of as we sort of time gets the best of us, is there any sort of any sign you could signpost our listeners if they're sort of thinking, okay, well, I want to maybe give swimming all a go, I want to find out some information on the research. Can they sort of look it up anywhere?
Yeah, absolutely. If they go to swimmingworld.co.uk onto the website, they'll find lots of information on there, lots of really tasty recipes to try as well, and also information about where to find your nearest group if someone's looking to join.
That's great. Thanks for your time, Caroline. Have a great day.
Thanks, Jimmy. And you.